So what makes you a great musician? Are there things about great musicians that you can learn and emulate that will make you great? Well, there are 10 things that separate average musicians from great ones, and you should know them. Hey, and welcome to Music Space, where we help working musicians just like you learn how to quickly and easily make a living with your craft. So, if you're new here to the channel, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you'll be notified when new videos are uploaded. So, there are things that separate good musicians from bad ones and good musicians from great ones. There are things that are clear in the actions and thoughts and abilities and mannerisms and personalities of great musicians that separate them from average ones or bad ones. People like Michael Jackson and Bob Dylan or Jimi Hendrix and the Beatles, they all have things about them that make them great, and those things are different from average musicians. And by some estimations, these people that I named are considered the greatest of all time. So there are 10 things that really separate these types of musicians from others. So what are these things, and how do you know if you have them? Well, the first thing is you have an identity. And what I mean by this is that you have something that is specifically you, as opposed to what a lot of musicians are out here doing nowadays, sounding like other people and just emulating all of the licks and chops and riffs and runs of their favorite musicians, and they're basically becoming carbon copies of them. The thing about great musicians is that they all have an identity. When you turn on the radio and you hear a Michael Jackson song, you know it's Michael Jackson. The same thing with Prince and Bob Dylan and the Beatles. It's really crazy that one thing that can make you great and put you at that great status is having an identity and being you, but you're afraid to be you. Now, another thing that makes you a great musician is you do the hard work. Everybody wants it easy nowadays. We live in this sort of microwave oven society where we want everything done really quickly. We want to become virtuosos in 30 days or less. We want to gain six-pack abs when we haven't ever worked out in our life. We want to do that in 30 days or less, and so forth and so on. And what happens is this sort of mentality makes you take shortcuts. It makes you try to shortcut the process of getting great and becoming great and doing the work that it takes to become great. But great musicians all understand that becoming great or becoming good at something is a process that takes time, it takes hours, and it takes hard work. Now, another thing following that is that great musicians prioritize learning. Great musicians understand that the learning process is never ending. They consistently position themselves as students of their craft. They don't reach this great status and then, think of themselves as having arrived and, have this whole mentality of there's nothing else to learn. No, they understand that learning is a continuous process and they're open to that. So they always see themselves as learners. And another thing about great musicians is that they understand that music is a conversation. And what I mean here is that a lot of musicians, when they're playing and when they're performing with other musicians, they do a lot of talking and not a lot of listening. Go to your average club or bar and listen to the bands and musicians that are playing there, and there are some really talented people that are playing, but everybody's just talking at the same time, and it sounds like a lot of noise. Like, instead of the drummer and the bass player being in sync and in lock, they're out playing each other. The keyboard players and the guitar players are soloing over the vocalist while they're trying to sing and all of this kind of stuff. Just a lot of talking and not a lot of listening. But this is something that great musicians understand when playing with others, that there needs to be a suitable level of listening, and in a lot of cases, perhaps more listening than talking. And another thing about great musicians is that they all have a role model. All great musicians, like all of these people I named, the Michael Jackson, Prince, Beatles, and everyone, they all have someone who they pattern themselves after. Michael Jackson himself credits James Brown as one of his role models, and I'm sure you can see that. You have to have someone or a group of someones that inspire you, that you want to emulate and be like, not necessarily copy them and become carbon copies of them. We already spoke to that, but someone who inspires you by their greatness so that you can become great. And something else about great musicians, they have an interest in the below the surface kind of stuff. And what I'm saying here is that a lot of average musicians stay focused on a lot of this surface level stuff as it pertains to music. You know, they get caught up and hung on the things like fancy licks, riffs and runs and chords and scales and the number system, and they use these things as sort of the be all end all because it gets them attention. But great musicians have a deep interest in that below the surface level stuff. Music theory, how chords and scales work, secondary dominants, Neapolitan sixth chords, stuff you've probably never even heard of if you're not into music theory. But these are the types of things that great musicians get into. And here's the thing, they do this not to necessarily learn rules that put them in a box, but they learn a system that they understand that they can take the knowledge of and flip it to their advantage and make it what they wanted. In fact, this is what all great musicians who have done something like revolutionize a particular genre of music or something, this is what they've done. Somebody like an Elvis Presley comes to mind here, who took, the roots of like black gospel music and flipped it into this rock and roll genre. You see how that works? And it came from an interest in these deeper things, not just the surface level stuff. Now, also, if you're a great musician, you know that it's not about you. It's about the music. Great musicians put the music first. Think about this for a second. Have you ever asked the question when you're learning a song or when you're performing a song, how can I portray this song and bring out its essence and portray the feeling of it and give people the sense of what this song was meant to be? Have you ever asked that question? This is the type of question that great musicians ask because they understand it's about the music. Now, on the other hand, when you've been learning or performing a song, have you had thoughts in your mind of, man, how can I kill on this song? How can I just be a beast on this song? You see the difference between those two things? And the difference between these two things is what separates great musicians from average ones. Now, great musicians are also aware of their weaknesses and they embrace them. If I asked you right now, what are your weaknesses as an artist, as a musician, as a band? Could you tell me? It's not something that most of us just tend to think about regularly, right? But great musicians and great artists do. Great musicians are always looking to make things that aren't great about them or their craft or something that they can't do well. They're looking to make those things better. And that goes back to always being in that learning mode and being a student of something. It's because they realize that they haven't arrived at some final destination where greatness is now upon me and I have nothing else to learn and I'm just, need to shower down my blessings on the world kind of thing. No, they don't think like that. They go back and look at their performance tapes and recordings and all of this kind of stuff and listen to them and say, oh, you know what? I can do that better next time. Great musicians are always looking for ways to improve. Now, another thing, and this is a really important one, great musicians take action. Not one, not a single one of the musicians that I've named in this video so far sat on their butts and just waited for someone to give them an opportunity. They hustled and put in the time and put in the work, all of the hard work, and they created opportunities for themselves. So many musicians nowadays are just sitting around waiting for that call or text that says, hey, are you free on Friday night or are you free on Saturday night? And, just waiting for someone to call them for a gig. And these same people sit around and complain about the gigs not being good and the pay not increasing and, still doing $100 gigs and all of that kind of stuff. The truth is, if you want more as an artist, as a musician, as a band, here are some other videos that you can check out and make some stuff happen for yourself. Now, that said, there are a lot of free resources that I've put together just for you that you can find in the description of this video. Everything from an ebook that'll give you 10 tips on making more money as a musician to free contracts that you can use to book high-paying gigs and more. And they're all free and you can download them in the description of this video. So you can take action on that now. And in the meantime, here are some other videos that you can check out right now.